Hey Remy, how are you?
Hey, Anton, I'm very good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm also doing quite well. I remember that since we last spoke, it's been a couple months, and we first had like a proper conversation besides work, just like speaking about stuff. I think it was in like mid COVID, right? And everything was super stressful. It was a couple months
Yeah, it
ago, right?
was. I think it was the very beginning, no, when at that time,
Mm-hmm.
because I remember we just got like a COVID discount, so I think it was the very beginning of the COVID. Yeah, at that time.
Yeah, and you're keeping it. I mean, you're keeping the COVID discount. That's um, yeah,
That's
that
awesome.
it's yeah, and it's great for us to work with you guys. So why don't you? I mean, obviously we've spoke a couple times before, but why don't you give a little intro to people that might not know who you are? Just what's your experience been and what Vauban is?
Yeah, so my name is Remy. So I run like a startup in London called Vauban. So the if I had to say my brief journey in a few words, so I graduated in finance, and I wrote my master thesis at that time. So that was in 2015, 2016. So it was on actually a clearinghouse on blockchain. So which was way before like blockchain became like it was a very tiny space at that time. So my experiment didn't really work, but doing it, I interviewed a company in Singapore that was called Autonomous. I don't know if you've heard of it, but what they were trying to do was to digitize private company shares on the blockchain. So, like every share would be a smart contract, and you would sort of automate startups equity like that. So kind of what e-shares, a Carta is doing in the US, but on blockchain. So that's how I ended up working for them. And that's how I got involved into the space I'm in today, because, my background was equity research, which was sort of very, very different. Um, so while I was there, I saw an opportunity to do um, not startup companies like corporations, but more complex type of entities. So in particular, funds and SPVs. Like there's a lot of friction in the market, and anyone that has launched a fund, and I think you've been working in venture yourself, will tell you that the experience of putting together a fund of an SPV is just horrible. Like, I mean, fundraising is not easy, of course, but just the whole process with the lawyers, the administrators, etc., is just a nightmare. And
Especially
I
if it's
think
your
more and
first fund,
more,
you just don't know what to look for, and there's all these like little things that you now know you need, apparently.
yeah,
And
exactly. So at that time, we saw that it was, especially in hedge funds, there were a lot of people that were um, they were working like in on trading floors in investment banks, or they would be working in market makers or hedge funds, etc. And they would just want to resign and start their own shop, even if it's just very small with a few millions from friends and family. And yeah, exactly, they didn't even know where to start. So that's how we created Vauban. That's where the idea came from.
cool. And so Vauban is, for our listeners.
We're bringing great user experience to the alternative investment space. So, we're a platform that make it very, very easy for you to set up funds and SPVs. So, really digitizing the whole process and making it simple and easy and affordable. So, yeah, that's how I would describe it. Like it's a user-friendly platform to set up funds and SPVs that skip the whole process with the auditors, the lawyers, the accountants, etc.
So I mean that pretty much answers my second question was how did you end up working on something so complex? Because Vauban is not your average product that a young guy like you would be working on. So you've had some experience in finance, and how when you thought of the idea of making fundraising simpler, making it a better user experience. What was next? Because I'm assuming that it was quite difficult to think of what to start with and what people to bring on your team. What was the thought process there? Like, how did you evolve to actually put a team together and have a successful project?
So I would say the company has changed with time. I guess like most companies. So initially, when we started, what we were was a platform for easily set up a hedge fund, and we would do just one type of hedge fund in Cayman, and you could come on our platform, easily deploy your hedge fund of templates, invite your investors, and you would have a very bare bone but compliant way of accepting external investors and deploying your quant algorithm or your if you're doing like a manual trading strategy in a very very easy way. And then we saw the opportunity to do that for more of these complex entities. And it was really pushed by our existing clients. Like, people would be like, oh yeah, can you help me with my holding? Can you help me with my venture fund, etc., etc. So that's when we thought, we could extend to any asset holding legal entity. And that's very, very powerful, right? Because, anything around us in this, now we brand them and call them wealth containers, and everything, most of the wealth in the world is in wealth containers. Like, some of it may be in bank accounts, like maybe a tiny part of it, but most of it really is in these REIT and partnerships and companies of this world. And that's a very exciting bit, right? Is that we think, that building I'm here today, when there's going to be on Vauban, and the building you're in, and the Ableton Live license in the computer behind you, would be on Vauban. But so how the process went is that we started that platform to easily launch a hedge fund, and the product grew very organically from there without any sales or marketing. And it would just be a tiny bit viral because every person would invite its investors to subscribe, and then when an investor wanted to do something, they would do it with us as well. Then we extended to venture funds, and that was so that done well as well. But let's say that for venture fund, which is not a problem for us, but we had interest from all sort of sponsors. Like, we had people reaching out cold on the website, which are some of the largest venture managers in the world, to the smallest. But we only converted the small one. We never converted the big ones. At some point, the bigger ones said, listen, I don't want to use you for my funds because, you're too new and you're sort of lacking the brand name, which I can understand. But they would be like, where we would really love to see you guys is for our SPVs, for our deal by deal, because it's such a horrible process that generally we just let very valuable follow-on allocation go to waste. So that's when we released our deal by deal offer. And that has created something completely new. Like, we had people coming to us, even though, initially it was just for follow-on SPVs for venture capitalists. But we had people reaching out to us for like race horses and, classic cars,
all your
and
classic
artworks.
SPV weird type of stuff, like a Rothko painting and so on.
Exactly. And that's the really, really cool thing about what we do, is that it's really unlimited, right? It's just we're offering people a tool, and then they can exercise their deal making and their creativity with it. So yeah, that's how we grow. I would say pretty much organically. Even today, we don't have anyone dedicated to marketing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, building the team was a challenge, definitely. I think that's probably, I would say, the hardest bit that we had to face, because what we do is at the intersection of law, finance, and tech, and it's it's really hard to find people that have even a sense of the three of these things. Like, I think people nowadays tends to be very, very specialized. But, if you're a lawyer, and you're going to work on a tech product, you need a sense of what's scalable and what's not, that's that can be very. I mean, of course, every software engineer has that, but if you were more in a space like legal services, that could be very, very hard to develop. So I think the thing that we have these three dimension to our product makes it very, very hard to recruit great people and to make sure there's a cohesion within the team. I think we've done a great job so far, but the hardest, I think, is yet to come on that side, because so we're 20 people today, and probably true sort of HR and recruitment challenges happens when you're, I think from our side, from 20 to 50 and then 50 to 100.
Yeah. I wanted to say, like, when you 10x from there, so it's like 20 to 200. That's the sort of stretch that. Typically, once you start to not know the people in the office, like a couple of people have been there for a few weeks, but you never talk to them, I think that's when it sort of becomes a bit weird, and it's like it's no longer your company, it's no longer like your home. It's still yours, but
exactly.
it's there. You see some new faces, and so that raises a good question. So we did some design for you guys, and we worked on the website. Now we're doing UX, and hopefully that's gonna your new interface is gonna come to life pretty soon. And we love those kind of cases, because fintech is kind of known in the design world to be lagging a few years behind the trends. So sometimes when a big bank does their like design revamp, they come to a studio, they say, hey, it's 2020 now, we look like we're from 2010, we want to look 2015 today. Like they just want that gap to be there. And you guys, and some people even argue that not looking the freshest and the friendliest and the coolest is a factor that helps them with trust. It's these guys do finance, we don't do design, we don't do marketing, we do what we know. And you guys obviously didn't do that, which is great. And you chose to look stylish. I mean, not too childish, obviously, because of your target audience, but still, in my humble opinion, if I do say so myself, your website looks nice. What's your take on design in fintech? Do you have a particular opinion on whether a service should look good if it's current, or maybe it really shouldn't, and it does evoke trust when you look kind of bad?
So I think you're making two very, very good points, and tackling two very strong assumptions. So I think the first one, that the era has already arrived. It's within consumer services, and you're right. There was that assumption that if you're doing something serious like your bank, it has to be ugly, because if it's ugly, it means that it's more professional and secure, etc. And some people came, like Revolut or even Tinkoff in Russia, and they showed you that it's untrue. Actually, it has nothing to do, and people, like consumers, they enjoy clicking on a button and having a car arriving like Uber, and they enjoy the same type of behavior for their finances. And that's how you have all of these Revolut and Robinhood, etc., that try to make it very easy for people to do this transaction, which are with traditional banks very, very hard to do. And now that they're doing it, I think larger banks are trying to catch up, but obviously it's harder. And I think that's the beauty of this word, is that as a small company, as a startup company, which has a tiny fraction of the power and staff and finances of a big bank, you still have your chance, because you're agile, you don't have any legacy, and you can beat very large banks at their own game, which is pretty cool, right? The life would be tasteless otherwise. Now there's another assumption. So these guys have shown, and I think now everyone would agree that a great user interface and great user experience and great design is enjoyable for any type of services, even if they're extremely serious. But now there's something else, is that there is that assumption subside for B2B services. So I think for anything consumers nowadays, most things consumers, you have a cool version of it, which is going to be nice, easy to use. Whether it's taxi services or banking or shopping, pretty much everything you want to do in terms of as a consumer today, you're going to have a very, very enjoyable experience and a great service and an amazing user experience. But it's not the case at all for anything that's B2B. Like, the concept of user experience doesn't even exist in professional services, really. It's not a concept that even exists, and most of these firms, they don't have anyone dedicated to it, and it's essentially, it's not in the culture of that universe and this firm to put themselves in the foot of the client, of the the user or the consumer, whatever you want to talk it, the customer, and think, how can I make that person's life easier and better, through my product and services? So the focus is really not on the customer at all. And essentially, that's really what we're trying to do. I think that one of our core missions would be to bring the concept of user experience and great user experience to that sort of professional services, and in our case, to the alternative investment space in general. And you can feel like, we had that a little bit, where some people would be, but it's finance, right? You're dealing with dozens of millions on a daily basis, and, it has to be serious. It can't be, all good looking and flashy and...
So you're finishing a point about design when we got interrupted.
Yeah, no, exactly. So essentially, we don't think people change dramatically when they enter the office in the morning, and we think that great user experience should be brought to every product that humans use, even the one which have a very professional end.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. It's nice to see people that are bringing good UX to professional tools. Because I think for a while it's been that finance stuff and really work related stuff. Work is not supposed to give you pleasure. It's supposed to be daunting and complex. And yeah, it's nice to be in the world where that's sort of changing and becoming more intuitive. And you're building Vauban in your offices in London, and you're from France. So can you tell us about London, what it's like for a founder? Because I've been there a few times. I've never lived there. I've never spent a while, and I have a bunch of friends that live in the city. But why did you make a decision to do it in London and not in like Paris? And how has it turned out? Is the culture good? Is it fun and exciting to be there?
So for me, it was a little bit of, I wouldn't say it was a coincidence, but essentially my job after uni was in London. A lot of jobs related to finance are in London. And I was just there, when I had that idea. And because I've never worked in Paris, and I'm not from there either, I'm from the south, I didn't have an especially strong network in Paris. And I have a little bit of a network in London because I was working there before. So, I just thought I might as well stay here. It's going to be probably a little bit easier to raise money for what we want to do. I think London makes sense as well. There's a much bigger market here than in France. Then to reply to your question, I think that London I think it's probably one of the best places in the world to start a company, especially if you want to start a company with global reach. I would say it's probably the best place in the world to do so outside of the US. And it's just here, there's a whole mindset that a successful startup is one that's going to take over the world, and people are designing their products and their digital products and services for the world. While in France, and I guess it's probably a little bit similar in Russia too, but I know that in France a lot of founders design products mainly for the French market, and I mean, not all of them. Obviously, there are some fantastic French startups, tech companies. But I think, language plays a big part for sure. London is very, very international. Like, I don't remember the numbers, but it's pretty much half of, finance workers, etc., in the city who come from another country. It has a lot of foreign founders. I would say, again, I don't know the numbers, but like
No,
a lot of
just the
fintech
emotion,
founders
like
in
what's
London
it,
are
what it feels
foreigners.
like. Yeah, I'm not looking for numbers, so it's just a perspective.
Yeah, no. So I think it's a great place to do so. I'm glad we're here. It's also a very fertile land for startups. So the general culture is not in the UK is not as risk averse as it is elsewhere in Europe, I think. It has one of the greatest pool of talents, right? And because a lot of people came from pretty much all over the world, to have sort of high income jobs in London, and a lot of them stayed there afterwards, and which means that you can access very, very high quality workforce in London, and a very diverse one, which I think you couldn't anywhere else in Europe. And I think access to capital is probably much easier than elsewhere in Europe, and probably than in most places outside the US. And it's just because, of the whole banking and finance industry that there is in London. There are just a lot of very wealthy people, which is a great thing because, it probably makes fundraising for startups a little bit easier. They also have this incentive here called EIS, where you can claim back all of your startup investment, half of your startup investment off your taxes. We're not eligible for it, but it seems to be a big boost for the early stage tech startups in the UK.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's a common, maybe it's a misconception. The culture in the UK is quite difficult for foreigners to penetrate and get accustomed to and be taken, really feel at home, and it's a sort of mindset that I don't know exists, and I'm not sure whether it's correct. And I think US is taken a lot more lightly with those kind of issues. So
Okay.
it feels like,
No, I think.
yeah. What's you got the question, so I don't have to finish it.
So I think first, I think that London is very different from the rest of the UK. And probably, British people would be in a better position to talk, about it than me. But like, I think there are few countries where the difference between the capital and the rest of the country is as big. And London itself is very, very, very international and very open. And for this, I genuinely think there are very few places in the world which are as open as London. And I think that's probably a big difference between, for example, Paris and London, is that, Paris is France. And if you want to thrive in Paris, I mean, you're going to find exceptions, right? There are other ways, but you have to become French, or you have to sort of embrace the French culture. While in the UK, London is a very neutral international ground. And I mean, I have really nothing against the British culture at all, and I actually really love it. But you don't have to make a successful career in London at all. And you can see that from all of the sort of very successful entrepreneurs and bankers around the city.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a lot closer to US in that respect. So because a lot of people come from different places, it's a mixer essentially.
Probably, yeah, it probably is. And yeah, I don't know to what extent it's inherent to the Anglo-Saxon culture and to what extent it just became like that because, English became the dominant language. And that means that, English-speaking countries will attract more people than others. But it does generally feel that way.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. And actually, something closer to the reality and the current situation. Obviously, you're working a lot with hedge funds and venture funds. I'm not sure about the proportions, but still, that means you're in contact with the people that serve as a pretty good indicator of the economic state and whether investors feel optimistic or pessimistic about the future. And have you noticed any activity during these past few months, whether it be 6 months or just 3 months? What was it like for funds? Have there been more funds raised because investors would like to buy the second dip in the second wave that we're all anticipating, or have that process slowed down? And what was the general motion that you're sensing, if you're sensing one?
So it depends. I think there's for hedge funds. I think they're definitely having a second breath, right? Because they haven't been ultra attractive since the credit crisis, and because we have had such a fantastic and long and never ending bull markets, like the interest into hedge funds faded away, and I think now they definitely having a second breath. And a lot of our clients are performing very well through that volatility. But yeah, generally there's a lot of volatility, so it's very healthy for hedge funds. But I also think that more investors will allocate part of their investment portfolio in hedge funds than before. So yeah, probably their time has come again. On the venture side, so there's definitely a break in venture fund launches. And I think a lot of people that had plans to launch a new venture fund, they've just rain check it, like they just postpone to whenever things feel more stable. But we had a lot of activity on the deal by deal side, especially as a lot of startup will raise bridge round in the form of CLN to extend their runway and to go through the crisis, and some of them fantastic companies, and that's attracting a lot of investors. So we've on the SPP side we have a lot of that sort of deals. We also had a lot of secondary transactions, which is very normal things to have when there's a crisis going on. As founders, early investors, and employees are looking to cash out part of their holdings, even if that means at a discount. So overall, our activity has increased since the crisis happened. Then it's essentially we're not big enough for it to be representative of the market. So I think it's also due to the fact that we're growing, like we're a fast growing company. We're a startup, so we're a fast growing company. So we just continue to grow. The other thing is that we're a tech company and we provide services in a tech way, and I think that resonated particularly well with general partners being on their laptop at home, zooming everyone all day. So we've seen a lot of large investment not large like Goldman Sachs, but large like, let's say, big VC funds, etc., that we've been eyeing for over a year, and finally now during all these they were like, okay, let's go with it, guys. I need 4 SPVs, etc. So let's say I think the market as a whole has then definitely gone down, but because we're capturing a larger part of it, our activity has been pretty healthy.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's a crisis that's unhealthy for the world as a whole, but it's quite healthy for new and nimble players that are small and can fight for pieces of the
But
pie.
I think venture funding, like on a personal view, I mean, the COVID crisis, like, it accelerated the sort of digital transformation dramatically. So I don't think funding for tech companies is going to dry out in the long run. And you know, a lot of people, they have postponed their venture fund launches, but that's more of a I don't know. I have the word in French. I don't know how to say in English.
What's the French word?
It's just they might feel like it's not super appropriate to launch a fund now, and I think that plays a big role to it. But I think this is merely postponed. This is not cancelled, and I think there's going to be a lot of money available for, you know, innovative tech companies in the near future.
Yeah, because what I've seen, and just looking at the venture market right now, it's quite a simple situation that typically happens when there's some uncertainty. Projects that are not quite, not really hot deals just stopped attracting capital. All right deals attracted a much lower valuation, and the hot deals didn't even drop that much in the valuation. And you see that with the recent IPOs, and that's really why most VCs are in the business, is the IPOs. And if the IPOs are doing well, the whole industry is sort of doing well. And the IPOs were all right. So, I mean, and I was looking at it from a perspective, like back when this whole thing started and everybody was scared that there's going to be not enough money to go around, I had a sort of mentality where, look, it's the money's locked in for a 10-year long fund, right? And it's might be a longer time frame for most funds, especially if they're in the beginning of their life cycle. Might be a long enough time frame to, live through the down period and come back up. And the money is there. It's locked in, and it's unlikely for a fund that's dispersed most of their assets to just be like, hold up, we're not going to diversify anymore. We're just going to back out. So it does seem like if you're on your path to profitability, if your burn rates aren't staggering, you're most likely going to reach funding, like attract funding and reach the goals. Maybe not a
Yeah,
crazy
exactly.
IPO that you were hoping to get, but maybe it's some kind of M&A exit, something like that. So yeah, I think the situation is pretty much makes sense, and not so many things make sense nowadays. So I'm happy when something does. Yeah,
Yeah, no, exactly, absolutely.
cool. I mean, and like the last question, I noticed one of the things back when you and Sophia, the project manager that leads the Vauban project, when you were showing the interface. And you were giving us a demo. You created an account for a user called Rodion Raskolnikov, which is quite a famous guy we study in school. Character of Dostoevsky. And that was really funny, and we appreciated that in the team. We took a screenshot of that, and everybody was like, wow, Remy knows our culture. Was that a coincidence? Or do you know Dostoevsky, and do you know anything
So
else?
yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite novel. I think it's the favorite novel of probably a lot of people across the world. Like, it's one of the top literature pieces of all time. And no, I mean, we don't have it in school. Like, French school is very centered on France, so you're only going to study French writers and French literature, etc. I guess it's a little bit the same in the UK and probably in Russia as well.
Yeah.
Like any country that had a significant sort of literature output, they would just focus on their own. So I've read it more recently, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I can't say I'm a big connoisseur of Russian literature. Like I mean, even of Dostoevsky, I love that novel, but it's the only one I've read of him. So I've read War and Peace of Tolstoy as well.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that.
I found it a bit heavy for my taste.
Yeah.
But,
It's not something. It's not something you enjoy. It's like a medicine. Actually, our literature professor was like, "You're not supposed to enjoy this. This is like you get cured by drinking some stuff that doesn't always taste nice, but then eventually you feel better. So this is what it is."
Exactly. And I thought it was interesting as a French person to see Napoleonic Wars from a Russian perspective, because obviously as a Frenchman, you always see that from
Right.
the French side, which is obviously a very, very different paint. And now recently I mean, I think there's something fascinating about Russian culture in general, that it's Eurasian, it's very unique. Like, it's very dissimilar to Asia, but it's very dissimilar to, Europe as well. I mean, at least Eastern Europe. So I think he has that thing very unique and proper to it that a lot of people enjoy and are fascinated about. Now, recently I've been reading about like post-Soviet, like Russian history, like all, the Yeltsin era and the making of the oligarchs, and finally Putin era, and I found it very, very interesting as well. But yeah, I'm a big history buff in general. I could read about history from any country. I really love history.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think Russian culture compared to any other, there's a comforting note of fatalism. Like, it's, if you know what I mean. Most Russian songs that are emotional, and most Russian like pieces, they sort of have a note of like, oh well, everything is shit and we're fucked.
Oh, really?
And but it's in a positive way. Like, you live, it's very fatalist. Yeah, it's oh well, life is terrible, but then hey, let's dance because of that, and let's embrace the fact that we're still here, and there are good that's my personal take. It's by no means is this culturally significant. It's just words that I'm saying. But I find that it's like a little thing that makes something quintessentially Russian. It's like, well, we're fucked. Yeah.
So that's very interesting, actually, because like, I would say on average, French are very pessimistic, but they don't necessarily make like the end of it as you describe. British and American are probably, I mean, obviously it's average, right? There are huge countries with millions of people who are all different, but probably, like, American culture is probably a bit more enthusiastic about life. But so you would say Russian are, they're not pessimistic, they're fatalist. It's like, okay, it's fucked, but whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, American is enthusiastic is the best word. It's very positive. It's very like uplifting. And as a Russian coming into an American culture, you're like, what are you all so excited about? There's going to be nothing great. I mean, there are going to be good moments where you think everything's going to be amazing, but eventually that Russian sort of cynical fatalist kicks in. And it's not a negative thing. It's very important to understand. Russians know how to party and how to enjoy life, knowing that everything is shit.
Okay.
It's this sort of, it enables you to accept the negatives and be truly happy about the positives, and not mix those two together. Once you've accepted the bad part, you take the good part as just 100% of good and no bad. It's my personal take that I've developed after living in multiple places.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like Dostoevsky.
All right, cool. Well, I'm not going to distract you anymore. Thank you for an amazing hour or so that we've been talking. I don't know how long it's going to be in the final edit. Yeah, but it's been exciting, and you're our first English-speaking guest. And we're going to be speaking to more founders and like people that we work with all over the world. And I'm really happy that you were the first one. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Anton.
All right.
Have a great day.
Have a great day in London. Bye-bye.
Cheers.